morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Songwriting Simplified with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at jonnylipshamstudios.co.uk in a slightly chilly, bracing for a very, very damaging storm incoming, which should be arriving on Friday. So we are preparing for that. So that is kind of the weather story here in the southeast of Scotland. It's going to be a bad one. We're looking at potential wind gusts in excess of 90 miles an hour, with average wind speeds well up into the late 60s, early 70s miles an hour. So it could be pretty bad. Sunday night graphics. Don't know what you're talking about, dude. The intro. Oh, was the intro wrong? Did I have the intro wrong? Yes, I did have the intro wrong. Well spotted. There we go. Fixed. You're absolutely right. I had it set up wrong. There we go. I just forgot to change it over. But thank you. Well spotted, Brett. So yes, as you can hear, I am not yet fully fit. I have had flu for probably the better part of a week, which is not particularly been entertaining. This one has pretty much floored my entire family. It's been pretty brutal, to be honest. And so, yeah, so I am not very fit, as you can hear in my voice. But I'm better than I was, that's for sure. So tonight's show is basically going to be the first kind of proper show of for Songwriting Simplified of 2025. So I figured that what we should start doing over the course of the next couple of weeks is just basically covering a few basic things that pretty much I'm anticipating that everybody here will already know and understand. And we can kind of expand from there. So the big part of what we're going to be doing is your questions are, of course, the center focal point of this show. That's what it's about. So if you have questions about songwriting, composing, arranging, you have music theory questions, you want to talk about a specific set of chord changes or something like that, then get those into the chat. If you want to talk about transposing instruments, that's a subject that we are definitely also going to cover, because I would like to talk a little bit more about how we actually write for things like a horn section, how you write for woodwinds and brass and that kind of thing. Because you may never, depending upon the style of music in which you work, you may never, ever write for those instruments. But on the other hand, it's a useful little skill to have, because you just never know when somebody says, hey, this song is really great. I really like this song, but I would really like it if it had a horn section. Now, yes, you could just knock up a virtual horn section using a horn section sample library, of which there are many. Chris Hine Horns is amongst one of the best ones. But there's the session horns as well, which is equally good. Years and years ago, there was a sample library called the Pop and Funk Brass Library, which was very good. I still have that on CDs, believe it or not, because I used to use it in Cubase and it would map across the keyboard. However, never designed for Studio One because it predates Studio One. So it won't do that. So yeah, transposing instruments is a big thing that we're gonna cover that. Probably next week or the week after, we will cover transposing instruments, and we will basically do a little bit of writing for horn section. Now, the cool thing about transposing, just to kind of preempt that a little bit, is that both the score editor in Studio One and Notion 6 and Notion Mobile do the transposing automatically for you. So it's not something that you necessarily need to get your head around super duper fast, because most notation software will do it for you nowadays. You can just write what you want to write in concert pitch, and then let the software do the transposing for you. However, you do need to be aware of the range and the playing range and playing register and written range and register of the instruments that you're using. So if it's trumpet, trombone, alto saxophone, tenor saxophone, baritone saxophone, you need to know what those are, so that when you are writing your horn section parts, you're not writing notes that are too high or too low. Or, you know, the register that you're asking the musicians to play in, it just doesn't sound good. It just sounds like a bit of a squeak fest. And particularly for saxophones, that is a sound you just don't want. Imagine your little cousin who is this tall, who has suddenly decided that they want to play violin. And so you get them a student violin, and they're in their early days of trying to get the bow to not bounce on the strings for a start, and then draw the bow across the open strings with a nice even tone. That takes a long time to master, and during that time, it's a bit of a squeak fest. It sounds like a cat having more kittens than it's expecting. And so it can be like that for saxophones if you write them in the wrong register. So we will cover all of that, because I think horn section writing is a useful skill to have, just like writing for strings, even if it is just a small string quartet, is another useful skill to have. So we're going to cover that this year, because we didn't really go into much detail on that last year. So this year we will. It is a topic that we will cover, and we will use the score editor in Studio One, and we will use Notion for that as well. So you get to see both side by side. If you're a member of Studio One Pro Plus, you get access to Studio One, Notion 6, and Notion Mobile. Okay? Notion Mobile is free, by the way, so even if you're not a member, you can go and get that from the App Store on whatever device it is you're using. So it's available on Google Play, it's available on the Microsoft Store, it's available on the Apple iOS Store, and the Apple Mac Store, and Amazon as well. So you can get it in a bunch of different places for mobile devices or even desktop devices like a Mac or a PC. I happen to have it on both my Mac and my PC, and on my Android phone, because you can get it from the Samsung Galaxy Store as well. And I also have it on iPads. I have an iPad Pro and I have a regular iPad as well. I don't have an iPhone. I'm not that much into Apple, to be really honest. But yes, so Notion Mobile is free. You can go get that right now if you want to. And install it onto your device, onto your PC, your Mac, your whatever you want to install it on. So if you want to follow along with that, and also the byproduct of doing all of that is you'll learn a little bit of notation as we go. I'm not going to make the notation complicated. I'm going to make it simple, so that you get the principles. And particularly with Studio One, we can show the note editor and the score editor side by side, so you get to see the piano roll, and you also get to see the notation. So you can basically connect the dots. You can connect what the note on the piano is with how it looks on the score. And you'll start to recognize pitch values and all of that stuff, which is, again, even if you're a mix engineer, knowing this stuff is very useful, because if you understand how the arrangement of a song works, and you understand how harmony works, you understand how orchestration works, then when it comes to doing things like automation of an orchestra accompaniment to a pop song, for example, which is things that I have done a lot over the years, this is something that you can do. This is something you'll understand. Even if I've done the orchestrations or somebody else has done the orchestrations or the arrangements and that kind of thing, the cool thing is that if you have this understanding in your background as a mix engineer, it's going to help you with automation. Because when you understand which instruments are needing to have, like, for example, if you're writing for woodwinds, so you have maybe it's a bit more of a softer tune, so maybe you're using saxophones in their lower register, playing nice and soft, where they sound nice and mellow, but you also have flutes and alto flutes, and then maybe a piccolo on the top. You'll need to know how to do the volume automation on those instruments to make sure that, number one, they are in balance with each other, and number two, that things like the piccolo don't get buried in the mix. So this is where understanding a bit about orchestration, a bit about arranging, is going to be a handy thing for you. So you folks in the chat here who are mix engineers like Kyle and Bobby Booth, don't discount yourself from subjects like transposing instruments and stuff like that, because it's all going to be helpful for you to understand. All right, so having got that very, very lengthy preamble out of the way, Billy Morgan, of course, was first in the door, followed by Craig with the W5 family, and we got Bobby Booth, Brett Marley, we got Dave Morgan, we got CHDB Music, we got Don Oliver, we got Dwayne, and we've got Keith from Radio Top Trumpet, and we got Just Bob here as well, which is awesome. Yeah. Kind of watch your writing in caps, please. I appreciate it if you don't do that, unless you're emphasizing a word, in which case I'll allow that. Okay, so do we have any questions? No, not at the moment we don't. But Brett is saying, glad you're on the mend at least. Hopefully the rest of the family is showing the same improvement. Yes, my wife is back at work. My kids are back at school, which is good. It's a good place for them to be. At the moment, I'm kind of like the last one. I have been back at work, but that's only because I work from home. If I was actually working outside of home at the moment, I would not be working. I would be out of action still. But because it's a really short commute from the bedroom to the studio, I've been doing that. So let's see, no questions as yet. Kyle says, when dealing with real instruments, it's something you should understand. Yes, definitely. Could not agree more. Whether you are not even writing, maybe your music is metal, or maybe it's, hardcore, or maybe it's EDM or something like that. And you're just like, you know what? Writing for string quartet, writing for brass sections, I'm just never ever going to encounter that. It's just outside of my wheelhouse. I don't do that style of music where I'm going to require any of those. You know what? The more you know and the more skills you have, therefore the more tools you have in your toolkit, and the more available for work you can make yourself. It's one of the reasons why over the years I have just basically picked up different instruments as I've gone along through my my 40 or so years career. I've learned a lot of instruments. I started out as a drummer. I quickly picked up upright bass, followed by bass guitar, and piano followed pretty quick from there. I play trumpet badly, but I play trumpet. I can make notes and it actually sounds okay. I play alto saxophone. I play probably a dozen instruments to a good enough standard where I could actually play on somebody's record playing those instruments. And so my theory was, when I was a kid, the more I know, the more understanding of music I have, and the more instruments I can play, the more work I'm going to get as a musician. And that has definitely stood up as being true. Because, I can remember way back when I was about 17. I must have been 17. I had just arrived in London and I was, starting to make myself known as a session drummer. And on this particular recording date, they were like, yeah, the drum track is great. Yeah, that's all great. And I was just like, okay, this is like, you know how it is when somebody says, yeah, that's really great, when what they actually mean is, but it's not what we want. It's not what we're after for this particular recording. But they had also had a bass player in on the session, so it was me and a bass player, and we're just basically doing rhythm section parts. So it was a case of they liked what I was doing, but they didn't quite like the bass part quite so much that was being played. They didn't like his particular style on the bass. And so the bass player kind of packed up his gear and off he went off to probably another recording session somewhere, another studio. And so I was still there, sat with my drums, and they said, do you know another bass player? And I said, as it happens, yes, I do. And they said, okay, do you know if this person is available? And I said, yes, this person is available immediately, now, if necessary. They go, oh, really? How quickly can you get them here? And I said, in less than 1 second. And they go, you play bass, don't you? I said, yes. So, they had like a bunch of basses hung up on the wall. And so I just pulled a jazz bass off one of the hooks off the wall, checked that it was in tune, and then I started to play the more or less kind of in the vein of what the previous bass player was doing. And they go, oh yeah, this is it. We really like this. This sounds exactly like what we're after. And so I ended up playing drums and bass on that record. Not just on that one song, I ended up playing the whole album. But bonus thing was, because I was playing bass and drums on the session, I got double the money. Because they didn't have to go out and get another bass player. They didn't have to wait for another bass player to come in, which would have held up the session for a bunch of hours. They just basically said, oh, we'll just give you the other bass player's session money. So I got paid and the other bass player didn't. So yeah, it was so that for me was kind of like proof that the pudding is true. Because I started getting recording sessions and I started getting gigs playing bass, drums, and then when people realized I could also play piano, I started getting recording sessions and gigs playing piano as well. And when they realized, oh great, you're a singer as well, so I started doing backing vocals for a bunch of artists as well. And so before I knew it, I had work piling up because I could do a bunch of different things. So my point being is, even if you're a mix engineer and even if you work in rock or metal or progressive rock, that's your thing. You don't really work in any other styles. You've never mixed in any other styles before. Give these things a try. So that's why I want to cover these things, like transposing instruments, like writing for horn sections, like writing, string quartet arrangements, because it's just extra skills for you. And especially as we look forward to later in the year when we get to those songwriting challenges, it's an extra thing that you can bring to your song for those songwriting challenges if you want to take part. So this is all about equipping you. So I hope you understand that. So let's see. Brett says, I was hoping to hear a bit about what you have planned for the main subject to see if I have any probing questions. Yeah, this is kind of, I'm talking about what we're going to be doing over the course of this year. So transposing instruments is coming up probably next week, and then we'll start diving into some of the more kind of basic stuff, like harmony, basic triadic harmony, 3-note chords, that kind of stuff. And voice leading and voice movement and that kind of thing. Because all of that, again, is going to help you, whether you're a guitar player, whether you're a piano player, whatever it is that you are. And also different playing techniques. So, you know, a lot of guitar players, you guys know how to strum, right? Every guitar player should know how to strum, some kind of strumming pattern. So, you know, we'll talk about, you know, finger style, finger picking, and that kind of thing. And, you know, arpeggiating your chords, that kind of thing. And we'll cover the same on piano as well. So you're not just playing, but, you know, how to kind of make a, you know, a keyboard part that's basically just playing chords sound interesting. So things like that. We're going to cover those kind of things. Just Bob says, the other day you helped out JG and suggested using pre-flight. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Not sure if that's the correct name. Can you go over how that is used and how you can automate parts of it? You're talking about Deep Flight 1. Yeah, that's an instrument that is in Studio One. It's actually a really, really good instrument. And I actually did a video for Studio One 6 when we unveiled Deep Flight 1. So if you want to go check that out, that is already on my channel. I think it's in my Studio One 6 playlist. But yes, Deep Flight 1 is it's a very cool instrument. Let's see. I can give you kind of like a little 10-second thing on it, maybe. Yeah, we could do that. Why not? All right, so this is Deep Flight 1, and when you first open it, it has this default sound. Now, why it always defaults to blue, I don't know. I haven't figured out why it does that, but anyway. So, things that are automatable are this little guy here. You can move this around because basically, as you can see here, there are 3 different sounds that are blended together. Now, if you move this little triangle here, it changes the balance between these 3 different sounds. Let me turn this up a little bit so you can hear it a bit better. So if I move this over here, so all of those kind of things are automatable. And then at the bottom here, you have repeater and arpeggiator. You can set those up. And the cool thing is here is if you click on here, you can change the pattern to whatever you might want it to be. So we can go up and down, and there's like a 32 step little pattern thing here that you can adjust. And the more notes you add, the more it does. Now, if I click on this guy here, and if I click on this pattern button here, I can adjust the volume of some of these. We are distorting. Or you can just turn that off and then of course you can change the different patterns to, you know, something else like. And at the moment it's got hold on. Let's turn that off. So that's arpeggiator. Repeater is a little bit different. Okay, why is it not? Oh, it's because I'm on the repeater, that's why. And again, there's a whole bunch of different repeating sequences, including ones that I've made. So there's a few that are on offer there with this effects section here, and that's just on the default sound, but there's like all of these other presets here as well. All right, so a little bit of Deep Flight 1 right there for you. All right, let's see. Sean is here. Hello, Sean. Good to see you, buddy. I'm glad you're here. And Dave is here as well, aka Aurora's Boring Alice. He says he's been working on chord positions 135. Places to get along with other instruments. Okay, cool. I'm glad you've been working on that. That's good. Bobby Booth is talking about snow. And we got 20 people here, but we've only got 13 likes. If we could have a little like rally, I would appreciate that. Let's get the likes up to the same as the number of viewers. That'd be cool. Trevor is here. Hello, Trevor. Good to see you. Welcome back, my friend. Let's see. Trevor is asking, how do I get you on Zoom? Or is this part always YouTube? Yes, so my show is on YouTube. It's not on Zoom. But after the show is finished, Billy these days is the one that launches a Zoom call after show. Unless there is a Studio One meetup, in which case the Studio One meetup takes precedence. But I don't think there is one tonight, as far as I'm aware. And Billy says we will be on Zoom after show, but when we're on, I usually post the link in Studio One Plus community. Yes, and he'll post a link here in this chat as well. So as soon as you see that link in the chat there, Trevor, save that link, and then you've got access to it. Let's see, what else do we have here? Brett says, how would you tell Deep Flight 1 which intervals you want the arpeggiator to play? That's more of a Sunday Night Live question, but we can tackle that on Sunday for sure. So if you hold that question and bring that up on Sunday, we'll cover that for sure. I want to kind of, this year for certain, I want to make a clear distinction between Songwriting Simplified and Sunday Night Live. So this show really is all about songwriting and composing, arranging, and music theory. That's what this show is for. The Sunday show is much more about Studio One and features of Studio One and using Studio One and mixing and mastering and all of that stuff. So questions related to that need to be kept over there for Sundays. Okay, so I hope you understand. It's not that I'm wanting to ignore your question. Billy says, the Zoom link is always the same as Kyle said. Yes, it's exactly the same link every time. So you can just copy, paste, and save it. And then you've always got access to that link. And then, straight after show, you can just use that link. Brett then says, I figured it was a grey area as it does apply to music theory as well, but fair enough. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about Deep Flight 1 and that kind of stuff on Sunday. Let's see. Do we have any other questions? Because we're about at the halfway point. If we don't have any other questions, then we could go back to Deep Flight 1 if you guys have still got, more that you want to talk about. Because with Deep Flight 1, you can't tell it. You can tell the arpeggiator which way to orientate what you're doing. So how your pattern works in the arpeggiator. So, for example, if you look here, this shows that it's ascending. This shows it's descending. That's going up and then down. And then this is going down and then up. And then this one is a random mode. And then this is from input. So basically, whatever you do, it will use your input. And then this one is a chord mode. So let me quickly go over these, and we'll just use this one, which is quite a straight little pattern. And I'm going to try and find a bit more of a straight kind of sound. Let's try this one. I need something that's going to show this a bit more clearly. Okay, so this will work. So let's put the arpeggiator on. And we'll put it in pattern mode. And then, as I say, you can adjust these volumes. So you can make this kind of like pump a little bit. Not not actually following the pattern. Let's turn off the hold. Huh. Yeah, let's try and find a different sound. Yeah, with these kind of long sounds, it's quite hard to hear the actual pattern. But basically, these arpeggiators and things. Okay, this is now not responding. Okay, maybe this one doesn't let you. Why is this not letting me change that? Oh, it's because I've not got it switched on, because I'm an idiot. So let's put them all going to the arpeggiator. And turn it down a little bit. So if we were to put this in random mode, now as you can see here, you can actually have any one of these three or all three go into the arpeggiator. Which is very cool. So that can be quite effective if you want like different parts to be arpeggiated and different parts not to be arpeggiated. So we can take that one off and let's see what this one sounds like. A little bit darker maybe. And then, of course, we can tilt the blend. So that's quite handy. And then, you know, you can put it in chord mode. Or you can put it in up-down mode. You can also change the number of octaves it's got as well, so just like a 1 octave thing. It's a bit harder to hear. But if we bounce it a little bit further this way, maybe it might be easier to hear. So yeah, you can literally have hours and hours of fun with this. You can change the note values of the you can give it a swing if you want as well. So yeah, there's lots of different things you can do with Deep Flight 1 that most people have never covered in any of their videos. And you know, if if you want a different element to be slightly louder but still within this balance, yes, you can totally make it swing, which is what this little thing is here. So yeah, it's a whole bunch of fun. But it says perhaps we can explain exactly what an arpeggio is, so we know exactly what this is doing musically, or is that for an upcoming show? Yeah, we can cover that. We can talk about what an arpeggio is, for sure. Let's go back over to here so you can see the piano. So what is an arpeggio? An arpeggio, it's one of those fun Italian words. And basically what it means is it means to play notes in a sequence, essentially is what it means. So, but it's particularly referring to a chord. So if I was to play a C major chord like this, okay, that is not an arpeggio. That's just a straight block chord. Still not arpeggios. None of that is an arpeggio. An arpeggio would be where I break up the chord and play its individual notes individually. Like... All right, so that would be an arpeggio. It doesn't sound so great without a sustain pedal, though. So that's what an arpeggio is. It's playing the individual notes. And no, as demonstrated there, it can be more than 3 notes. 3 notes is what we call a triad. So this would be a triad of a C major variety. So that's a C major triad. I can play it block, or I can play it as an arpeggio, like that. And in fact, this little technique here if you have ever listened to a Mozart piano concerto, you would have heard that being played in the left hand. And this actually comes from an earlier composer by the name of Alberti, who featured in the late Baroque, the very beginning of the classical period. And he developed this little left-hand technique, which bore his name, and it's called Alberti bass. And so if you listen to things like Mozart's 21st Piano Concerto, and you listen to the statement of the theme for the first movement, the left hand goes and then you have in the right hand. Okay, so you have those two things going on at the same time. And so that little kind of arpeggiated figure where you go 1 3 5 3 1 3 5 3 1 3 5 3, that is Alberti bass. Doesn't figure a lot in popular music because it's not really a popular music kind of thing. But yes, arpeggios can contain as many notes as you want. I will find you an example of an arpeggio, which I think you will like. Which I actually used this in my Halloween piece called Bagpipe Murder. And Bagpipe Murder is in 7/8, by the way. But this is in the piano part. If I just bring that up for you on the screen here, and I'm going to solo. There are 2 parts to this piano part, or at least 2 little figures that are played. This is the first one. Okay, so that's definitely more than 3 notes. And then if I go over to this other part here, where it's a little bit different, listen to this. All right, so if I play these 2 little bits in context, and in fact, before we get to that point, let me show you what's going on the piano. I have rotor on the piano, basically just doing a slow speed, with a little bit of the horn cue cranked, and a little smidge of overdrive. And then I've got the woofer speed slow and the horn speed a little bit faster. So you can see the horn at the top there and the woofer down at the bottom, and you can see those spinning at different speeds. So that's what gives the piano that kind of in and out, kind of phasey kind of sound. So if I play this in context, you can hear how the piano affects the whole of the piece at this point. Okay, and then let's go to this other part here. All right, so hopefully that gives you a little example of different arpeggios and using them in different contexts. And you could see there that, these arpeggios have definitely more than 3 notes to them, especially the piano part here. There's, I think I'm playing like 6-note chords in, no, 5. I'm playing 2 5-note chords stacked one on top of the other, and then I'm arpeggiating them at almost the same kind of time. But yeah, not quite. So I hope that helps with the arpeggio thing. Great question, though. Great question. What is an arpeggio? Yeah, for sure. It's important, if I mention a particular musical term and maybe you're not familiar with it, just ask. Just say, hey, I'm not sure what that particular term is. Just say, hey, can you explain what an arpeggio is? Can you explain what a triad is? Can you explain, what X or whatever it is that we're talking about? If you want a little bit more information, just post it in the chat and say, at Jonny Lipsham, what does that term mean a little bit more in more detail? Invasion is here. Welcome to the channel. I don't know who you are, but I think you're brand new to the channel. And you say, I'm always using presence, the contemporary stuff on there. I'm still stuck on it. Okay, so you're talking about the contemporary strings and things like that come from the PreSonus Symphonic Orchestra library. Yes, they are very, very good. Basically, the symphonic orchestra for a long time was only available as a paid add-on that you could only purchase through the PreSonus shop. PreSonus shop is now gone, but what we are working on at PreSonus, because for those that don't know, I work for PreSonus, what we're working on at the moment is kind of building the shop inside of the main website, so you don't have to go to a separate subdomain to get to the shop. Everything is in one place. So that's what we're working on at the moment. And so you can, if you're in the United States, you have much more available to you for purchase directly on PreSonus.com than if you are in the EMEA or APAC area. So EMEA, what's that? That's Europe, essentially. Europe and the Middle East and Africa. That's what EMEA is, basically. If you're in APAC, that's Asia Pacific. So Australia, New Zealand, and all of that territory there. I don't actually know what you get to see in PreSonus.com in terms of the shop yet. But so in the United States, there's some things available that aren't available in EMEA yet. But these things are being worked on. So for the moment, the PSO, the PreSonus Symphonic Orchestra, for the longest time was only available as an add-on you had to purchase from the shop. And then with the shop going away, it then became only available through membership of Studio One Pro Plus. which is kind of where it is at the moment. So, albeit I think that's kind of changed a little bit now, so that if you have a perpetual license for Studio One, you also get the PSO as well. I believe that's the case. I will double check that to be sure, because I don't want to give you guys wrong information. And you guys are citing some really good examples of popular songs like Alicia Keys' If It Ain't Got You, a good example of arpeggios, triplets in 3/4. Yes, that is a very, very good example. And by the way, Alicia Keys is a fantastic piano player. She is extremely good. And a lot of people actually overlook her piano skills. They are seriously good. And Color My World by Chicago is another one that has some good arpeggio use. Yes. Neil says it's Someone Like You by Adele. Huge hit from about 15 years ago. The 3-note up and down on the piano, just like you were doing. It's exactly like that in the song. Yes, that is Alberti bass. And it's good to see that somebody has kind of revived that and brought that into a modern contemporary song. That's great. Well, 15 years ago. That's still kind of contemporary. I'm calling it contemporary, even if it's like, my kids would call that an old song now. A golden oldie is what my kids would call it. But no. Does fear still exist? I'm confused about the new structure. Okay, I'm going to enlighten you, and this will be the final question of the show, folks. So, I'm going to give you the story of the subscription model, and you will totally understand how it works. Back in 2020, not 2000, back in 2020, in July, in fact, July 7th, 2020, we launched Studio One 5, and at the same time, we launched our brand new subscription model called Persona Sphere. Why did we call it Persona Sphere? Well, back about 8 or 9 years previously, back in 2012, 2013, Presonus used to actually hold a gathering of the user community in Baton Rouge that was actually called Personosphere. The idea for this was dreamt up by one of our forum moderators. Sadly, the forum is no more. But one of our forum moderators by a guy, and the guy, his name was Skip Jones. He was a very, very good friend of mine. Sadly, he is no longer with us. But it was his idea, and he came up with the name for the conference as well, calling it Personosphere, a gathering of the Presonus world to Baton Rouge, and it would be held over a weekend, something like that. And that ran annually for 2 or 3 years. And then it stopped. So in 2020, when we launched our subscription model, and we were thinking about what we should call it, it was unanimously agreed that we should resurrect the Personosphere name. So that's what we did. So we called it Personosphere. And it had that name for quite a long time, until we realized that people were not really calling it that. Most people were basically saying, look, if you want the best and easiest way to get Studio One, that's the best way. Get the subscription. And so that's how people were talking about it. They were talking about Sphere and talking about it in terms of the best way to get Studio One and the best way to get the latest version of Studio One. And so that's still true today. So that then motivated a change of name, basically to rebrand Personosphere to Studio One Plus. Why do we call it Studio One Plus? Studio One is at the heart of the software that Presonus makes, right? So, but it's not the only thing. But the subscription model provides you with Studio One plus a whole bunch of other things, including Notion and Notion Mobile, our notation software programs. So That's why it became Studio One Plus. And then bringing us up to the present day, Studio One itself was renamed from Studio One to Studio One Pro. And the reason being is that it is now the only edition of Studio One. So we retired the Artist and Prime editions of Studio One, just leaving one edition. So there's no confusion as to what edition of Studio One has what feature set. So we've simplified everything to just one edition of Studio One. And so we called it Studio One Pro. Kind of a little bit like Logic Pro. And so therefore that necessitated a change in the name of the subscription model to reflect the fact that Studio One is now Studio One Pro. Studio One Pro is the new name for Studio One. So basically it's now Studio One Pro Plus. It's Studio One Pro Plus Notion, Notion Mobile, and all the other things, the collaborative tools and the extra add-ons and the Mix Effects engine, plugins, and all of those things. So that's why it is now called Studio One Pro Plus. And it used to be Persona Sphere. But it's essentially the same thing. It's like when Marathon bars became Snickers bars and then briefly went back to being Marathon bars and now they're back to Snickers again. It's the same thing. It's the same product. It just had a different name. But essentially it's the same thing. And so that's why we've had the branding changes, and particularly the branding changes most recently to Studio One Pro and therefore Studio One Pro Plus. Neil says Sphere was a better name, really. Pro Plus sounds like Purina pet food and product lines from 100 other companies. Well, I mean, you say that and I kind of agree with you to a degree. I mean, Pro Plus is obviously also like a caffeine tablet thing that you can get as well that gives you like a massive caffeine hit, which is very useful if you are working to a very, very tight deadline and you need to pull an all-nighter. Pro Plus is great for that. I have done that in the past. Don't do it anymore because I'm getting a little bit too old for pulling all-nighters. But that said, yes, it's not really called Pro Plus. It's called Studio One Pro Plus. And that's why. But yes, it's essentially the same thing, just different names. So there's not really a whole lot to be confused about. It's still the same membership thing. It's still the same subscription model that we have been providing now for 5 years nearly. In July, it'll be 5 years exactly. But that's the story. The story is it's the same thing. It's evolved, it's improved, it's got more features. But it's still the same subscription model that we started out with in 2020 at the kind of peak of the pandemic, really. So there you go. Evasion says integration of Splice being in Studio One, it increased my workflow dramatically. Yeah, it's done that for a lot of people too. And I'll be honest, I didn't think I would ever need Splice. I really didn't. But now that it's there, I'm finding a lot of really great uses for it. Anyway, we are 7 minutes over time. That is the end of the show. Thank you very much to everybody for joining me tonight. We actually, in the end, had some really, really great questions. And we had a good discussion there about arpeggios and triads and stuff like that. So that's kind of the vein in which we are going to go throughout the rest of the year. We'll be talking a little bit of basic music theory, and we'll be talking a little bit later in the year about orchestration and, how to write for different, a bunch of instruments. I'm not talking about writing for a full orchestra, because really that takes many years to master and learn how to do. And I'm not expecting anybody to get to that point at all. But yeah, that's kind of where we're heading in the general direction of a little bit more equipping you so that when we get to the songwriting challenges later in the year, you guys have got a whole bunch of skills, a whole bunch of tools in your toolkit with which to make some really great music for those contests. Anyway, with that said, that is the end of the show, and I will see you on Sunday for Sunday Night Live, where we will be talking all things Studio One and continuing looking at Deep Flight 1. Maybe we'll pull out another instrument to look at as well, and maybe we'll even bring out the PreSonus Symphonic Orchestra, which, by the way, if you want a little refresher on the PreSonus Symphonic Orchestra, I have a very old video series called the PSO series. It's a playlist, and you can go and check that out there. Basically, I made that when the PSO was originally launched. It's nearly 10 years old now, but it's well worth a watch if you want to listen to me being a lot less good at making videos than I am now. But I do go pretty thoroughly over all aspects of the PSO. It's a decent series. But yes, we can certainly revisit the PSO as well going forward. So I will see you all on Sunday. Take care. Have a great night and a great rest of your week. Good night, everybody.